We are not objecting to the existence of a God. The fact is that there is no evidence for the existence of such a concept, such a being. So there's really nothing to object to. What is happening is that over the years, there has been the proposition that God exists. And that has thrived very well in the past because of ignorance, because we did not have the kind of information we have today. So we're not objecting to anything. I think the facts speak for themselves. There's no evidence for the existence of a supernatural
and is there
being,
and is there any
a
evidence,
God in the skies and all that.
And is there any evidence to show that this evidence does not exist?
No, that question is an oxymoron.
In a short, yes.
If you ask
Fair
me.
enough, fair enough.
The thing is this, that when you're making a proposition, you're the one who is supposed to give us evidence that God exists. If you tell us that there is a God, you can't come around to me and tell me now to prove to you that what you're saying is wrong. So the burden of proof actually is on the religious groups. Having said that, we now have sufficient information. For example, Christianity. We know that Christianity predated the Bible. It predated Judaism. We know that
those are claims you're making. We don't have a pastor, unfortunately, on the panel, but as well they can defend their own stand through.
No, I'm telling you, this you have to actually, Google is your friend. I mean, just do some research. We have information today, and this is evidence-based, that Christianity actually came after, way after some other religions had existed, and human beings themselves have existed way before religion began. We know that, for example, human beings have been evolving. We are part of a diversity of other living organisms. The world itself is known to be 4.5 billion years ago. Scientists...
We'll come to the science of that a little bit, but let me get Engineer Abdurrahman as well to the conversation. The idea of an existing God, what is the Islamic or even the religious point of view in as far as the existence of a supernatural being is concerned?
Yes, definitely. When you have an atheist on the platform, you find them biting their tongues and lips many a times. When it comes to, the issue of does God exist, a lot of contradictions and denial from Harrison's side. When it comes to the religious side, or from a theist's perspective of the issue, does God exist, there have been so many arguments that support the existence of God that have been made by philosophers, that have been made by religion, that have been made by religious texts. For example, we have the Aquinas argument of cosmology, and we have also that is the cosmological, that is the cosmological philosophy.
Are you therefore alluding to that reason proves the existence of God in as far as the theist
reason does? For example, if you look at the simplest philosophies that describe the existence of God, you look at Aristotle's definition of God, the unmoved mover. When you look at Aristotle's principle, you find that he talks about every object having potentiality and actuality. For example, if I give you a few examples, when you have a candle, it is made of wax. So it has the potentiality of becoming wax, melted wax, and also has the potentiality of being and it has the actuality of being a candle. And when you look at, for example,
there needs to be a force behind whatever happens.
And
which begs the question, what or who is behind the force that is causing this force?
Now, that is what Aristotle calls the unmoved mover. There are so many arguments, but in this he says that every object that exists has potentiality and actuality, except God, who is pure actuality. So God is only actuality and does not have potentiality, meaning he does not change. For example, ice has the potentiality of being evaporated water, or it can be liquid water and it can be ice. So it has potentiality to be all these things. But God is an actuality that does not change. So it's just
let me get Harrison to react to that.
Let me just be clear. What Abdul Rahman is doing is actually telling the country that and he's actually presenting a logical fallacy, that we have an unmoved mover who now set into motion, everything. And by his logic, we are not supposed to question where this unmoved mover came from, that he's just there. You cannot be logically saying that there is an unmoved mover who we cannot question, that we cannot ask where did the unmoved mover come from. And this fallacy is something religious groups have never really explained. We normally go back and say, fine, we came from somewhere. This is actually what religious people normally say. They are very good at saying, everything was created and there has to be somebody who created the world and somebody who created everything. And things
must have
started from somewhere. But where did God come from? This is a question which they can't answer, really.
Let me interject you on that point. Looking at the universe, observing of how the universe is, at least artistically or everything, doesn't that allude probably and possibly to the existence of an intelligence behind it? That doesn't satisfy you?
If you look at the world, there's nothing quite intelligent about, the world. Think about it this way. Human beings themselves, we are prone to, a lot of diseases. I mean, we can't even live on water, let alone live on the top of Mount Everest, for example, because we are not designed. Rather, we don't have the capability of existing in places like Mount Everest, where oxygen levels are very few. We are not able to live in water because we are not adapted to that. It is fishes that are adapted to living in water.
We are very prone. Which again trickles down to the design and the making, which Abdurrahman says is because God wanted.
No, if you want to present an argument for intelligent design, then let that design be a design that allows humans to exist, in space, to exist inside water, so that you say now this is really intelligent design. And by the way, when you talk about intelligent design, you also have to look at the world itself. We are very prone to earthquakes and all these things. Just the other day, there was a tsunami which hit Indonesia, killing over 1,000 people. And if you ask yourself, so what is so intelligent about that? What we are seeing here is a world that is basically subject to the natural forces of nature. We are not really quite in control, and there's really no designer. I think we just...
Hold on that thought. I understand we have a caller, Paul, who is calling us from Ruai. Good morning, Paul. What are your thoughts in as far as the topic that we are discussing today is concerned? Paul, if you can hear me, what are your thoughts, your reactions in as far as the topic we are discussing in the studio today is concerned? Okay, I understand we have lost that caller, but of course the numbers are scrolling down on your screen. Remember, you can be part of the conversation as well. Share with us your thoughts, and let's have a conversation in the studio. Abdurrahman, Harrison was making a point of the intelligent design. The intelligence design behind what we see, yes, to Harrison is limiting, that we can't live in specific areas. Your reactions to that?
Okay, I'd like to first of all say that I've engaged Harrison in many occasions, and I find that logical consistency is not one of his strong points, unfortunately, and of any atheist, and I'm not generalizing, because most of the time I judge a person's intelligence.
And that's your individual judgment.
Yes. Okay. But when I come to a few things that he has mentioned, for example, he talked about evolution. For example, he said we are evolutionary beings, and these theories that they are using they are proposing instead of creationism, which is what we theists believe in, that God created everything. What they are proposing is actually very feeble when it comes to science. And again, I would like to make it very clear that atheists, for example, we have an atheist here, are very, are weaklings in science. when we talk about science, associating science.
For purposes of fairness, we also had atheists who are bigwigs in scientific
associating
field.
atheism with science is like the biggest propaganda I've ever known about. But let me come to now interjecting on what he was talking about. When you look at the sciences that they are proposing, they are very fallible. For example, we look at the Big Bang Theory, which they're saying that created the universe and everything that is in. You find many faults in the Big Bang Theory. You look at the evolution theory. For example, if you can allow me to point out some of those, is you look at science itself and you find in Newton's laws of motion, the first law of motion is an object in motion will stay in motion and an object at rest will stay at rest unless another force acts upon it. So that is how we have, you know, these things. Who set the balls rolling? Who set the universe rolling? Or they say,
and
so
who set the person who set the balls rolling?
Now
I think that's the question.
regress. Now that is regress. When we talk about who created the creator, that you have infinite regress, where you have.
And what is the possibility of this creator creating himself?
There cannot be a possibility of the creator creating himself, which will take me back to you know, Aristotle's argument. But if you allow me to finish this, we look at, for example, there are many you know, contradictions when it comes to the Big Bang Theory itself. We look at the evolution theory, which he says we are a result of cosmological soup, that, you know, over thousands of years it rained and rain poured and there was soup, and from this soup you know, we have all the human beings. So our great-grandfather is soup. But the most important thing to look at this when it comes to evolution is that we have no evidence for evolution, and it's not real science. We look at the stars, for example. We have stars degenerating, which is the exact opposite. We have the nova and the supernova of the stars, which
hold on that
thought,
Abdurrahman. I understand we have a caller, Paul. If we have you back, good morning, and what are your thoughts in as far as the topic we are discussing in the studio is concerned? Paul, if I believe you can hear me now, what are your thoughts in as far as the topic that we are discussing, the role of religion, which we will come to a little bit later, is?
The existence of God. Because if you look at during the days of our grandfathers and great-grandfathers, whenever there was a problem, they believed in the existence of a supreme being, which they never knew, they never saw, but they would turn back to this creator. For example, we had seers, isn't it? We had witch doctors and all those people who could solve problem at that particular time. Problem was in relationship to God. Today, we have Islam and we have Christianity. We have even Hinduism, Buddhism, all those, they believe in the existence of God. To an extent, when death comes, we mourn and we say, from him we came, to him we shall return, whether we are burning the body, burying the body, etc. Then me and you, our birth occurred in kind of a miraculous way. 9 months, you know. So it is like science and religion, but sincerely speaking, God is there and is taking care of his people. And one day we shall be questioned. That's my take.
Paul, before I let you go, probably to ask you one question. You made a point of our great-grandfathers, people who existed way before the religions of today came into existence. Do you think the being they worshipped back in those days is the same as the being that is being worshipped now?
Very true. I cannot dispute that, because take whichever side. If it is the Kikuyu, they would go to the Mugumo tree. The Luos, they had the kind of Luanda Magere, they believed in seers, including the Kalenjin, you see? So even today, like me, there's a time I went to visit my grandfather, and he told me, hey, 3 years we've not seen each other, we slaughtered the goat, we prayed, we visited the graveyard. You see, so God really exists, and I cannot dispute that. And those ways, in some communities like the Maasai, they still exist.
Paul, many thanks indeed for sharing with us your thought. I understand we also have another caller on phone. Good morning as well. What are your thoughts in as far as the topic we are discussing is concerned?
Okay, I just want to ask the head of the artist.
Okay, unfortunately we can't have her on air, but we will definitely get her. Abdurrahman, let me, you are making a point before, of course, we had the caller, which is that the evolution is not necessarily science on its own.
It's not, when we talk about evolution, it's not a science. It's something that has been inserted into our textbooks because of politics.
So do atheists as well believe that the existence of God has been exerted?
No, it hasn't, because just like we had a caller calling, and you know, although I'm not a proposer for mysticism and, you know, people believing in superstitions and all that, so there has to be a criteria that we use to judge which is the right religion or which is the religion of truth, which we'll come to later. But what we're saying is that it is evident that in every human society that has ever existed since the beginning of time, there has always been a shrine where God has been worshipped, whether it is in different forms, but in every society there is an innate nature in mankind that you know, guides a person to look for his creator.
Okay. Harrison, what of those who argue that if we can't prove the existence of God, as your stand is, that the rational position will be the agnostic position, to say we don't know, rather than say that he is not existing?
Let me first say it's very unfortunate that we have somebody who's purporting to be educated and at the same time denying that evolution is a science, saying that it's not a science. Evolution is a science from the perspective that Charles Darwin in the 19th century actually did a lot of research. He went around places like Argentina and other places, picked a lot of fossils, tried to relate one fossil with the other. And today, for example, we have genetics. We know that 99% of the genes, for example, in human beings are the same as the genes in chimpanzees.
Far from the science. Is it not rationally right or even correct to suppose that if we can't prove the existence of God, then the better position will be that we don't know if he exists, rather than say we don't?
Well, you see, we have the agnostics who take the position that, look, we don't know, we are waiting for the evidence. But I'll tell you for a fact that there is really no evidence coming right now or even in future. The idea of God, and I think we have to go back to the history of God, and that is important, that the idea of God arose because people at that time did not understand a lot of things. You know, you could look at things like lightning, you could look at the moon, and you know, there were stars. Think about yourself.
And there were justifications for all this.
Just think about yourself living at a time when there was no technology. Think about the time when our great-grandparents or people who lived long time ago, waking up at night and, you know, hearing voices which they don't understand, getting diseases that they have no cure for. So, and you know, of course, death was also a huge thing, like people die and people are asking, where do people go after they die? So they invented God to try and explain those aspects of life that they could not answer. And that used to work a long time ago.
Let me bring
my argument today is that it cannot work today in the information age. We have so much information. We now know, for example,
but it works. We have 2.4 billion Christians, 1.7 billion Muslims. We have 1.15 billion Hindus.
That is a logical fallacy called ad populum, where you're saying because so many people believe in something, therefore it must be true.
And what is the possibility that all these people could be wrong?
All those people are wrong.
Well, to you they are?
No, they are wrong. I'm telling you there is no evidence. I mean, look, I understand that in Kenya and in most countries, the belief in God it plays a big role in society. I mean, look at our politics, everything. There's so much that goes on and religion plays a big role. Look at our cultures, in burials, in weddings, you have to have a pastor there who officiates and so on and so forth. We have baptism, and so I understand the role of religion.
Okay.
And look, religion is not even on the decline in sub-Saharan Africa. We are seeing more and more people believing in God and so on. However, that is not sufficient to demonstrate. I mean, that's not proof that God exists. And I'm not here to persuade anybody, because people normally don't change this kind of positions.
As we conclude on the question of the existence of God, Abdurrahman, let me give you the final thoughts. If God exists, which is the theistic belief, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, and all share, why do people suffer in an atmosphere where we have an all-merciful God?
Yes, there are a lot of fallacies that have been presented by Harrison.
No, if you will kindly react to my question and answer the question.
Yes. And I would also like to, at the same time, kill two birds with the same stone. I wish you let me interrogate where we would have, clearly revealed the logical fallacies that Harrison has presented here today. What we have witnessed today here are logical fallacies. So why do we have so much suffering? This is an atheistic question that atheists ask, thinking that God is some sort of a vigilante that comes down when he sees a little girl being raped or a child dying out of hunger. So this is what happens. And if you quickly let me respond to, for example, we talked about evolution here today, and we said that it is not a real science. And when you gave it to him, I just had one of the funniest arguments that I've ever had, just because it's Darwin.
If you get to the question,
if it's Darwin,
yes,
I'm coming to the question.
Why do we have suffering in the event of people believing in an existence of a merciful God?
Yes, suffering is, relative, first of all. You can't say that people are suffering. And one of the reasons is, we have been given a guideline, we have been given a roadmap, which is, the religious texts. God sends his messengers and he gives them religious texts. So if we follow the religious text and everybody does what he's supposed to do, for example, everybody gives out charity. In Islam, we have like an annual giving, which is called zakah, and everybody looks after the poor and does what is ordained by God, we would not have these kinds of suffering, poverty, and all these things.
The question perhaps
when we look at
why does he watch when all this suffering is happening?
Because the world is transient. You don't look at the world as something that is, infinity. We look at it as something that is transient and is passing. So everything that is here, for example, the creation of evil, all these evils is not evil, but it helps the believer in God to get to a ranking that whenever you go through all these things, God gives you like purpose to live. He gives you rewards.
So he allows you to suffer in this world so that he rewards you. That's the understanding. Okay, I believe we have.
I have to respond to that. I mean,
a quick one. We have a caller. Cheriot Boniface, I understand you are now joining us by way of phone. Good morning. What are your thoughts? And as far as the conversation, the role of religion, which we will come to a little bit later, but first the existence of God and matters surrounding, of course, the existence of an almighty being.
Okay, morning.
Unfortunately, we have some technical hitch there. Let me react to that as we move away from the question of the existence of God.
No, the question here we are discussing is the issue of why bad things happen, why there is suffering in the world. And I'll be very, very clear. There is Christians are actually also asking, why are we suffering when there is a God?
So are Muslims, so are Hindus, so is everyone.
So is everyone asking. And the answer is that there is no relationship between suffering and first any God, because God does not exist. But it's a good question for a religious person to ask, because most of the pastors and priests and all these people come and tell you that, and this is their proposal, normally what they say in churches and in mosques and everything, that you're suffering, don't worry, come to God. God is going to help you to get you out of this situation. We've seen this in Kenya.
And there are those who argue. There are those who argue that he helped them get out of these situations,
look,
to be fair.
That is what normally the religious people present, that, once you turn to this God idea, all your problems are going to be solved. And, and that is why religious pastors have realized that especially in countries such as Kenya, third world countries, where we have a lot of poverty, the best business to do is to be a pastor, is to be a religious leader, because it is very easy to persuade people that when they turn to God, their lives is going to change around,
But at the same
especially
time,
when they are poor, especially when they are not able to, the government is not working, there is no social security for people. But let me tell you something.
At the same time, this quite number of people find solace and peace within these religions.
Yes, you see, but yeah, you find peace in religion, which is okay. In fact, let me tell you, there are so many Kenyans today who feel that just by the mere fact of believing in a God, they feel that there's somebody, there's a big brother watching. But I think
I believe as of now we have exhausted on that question whether God exists or not.
I was not able to respond to
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. So I believe that there are some people who have a basic knowledge of science who are listening to this. And he said that fossils are proof of evolution. Fossils are not proof of anything. When you pick up a bone and you start making assumptions of it, and you start using carbon dating, for example, carbon dating is very erroneous, and it has been proven. It's just because you see it in chemistry, it doesn't mean that...
we have quite exhausted on the question of the existence of God, of course, because of time. We will have such conversations as time unfolds.
Yeah.
Abdurrahman, in the 21st century, at a time when technology headlines almost everything, at a time when new inventions and new ways of lives are being adopted, what is the role of religion in the 21st century? And perhaps does it even stand a chance in this century?
Religion, and I'll come back to my former statement that religion, if it's the true religion, is very crucial at this age and time. And you find that Islam which I am proposing, has experienced a magnanimous amount, of upsurge in this age of scientific discovery and, technological advance. We have Islam, being the fastest growing religion in this time and age. And I can give you a reason why that is. And I really regret why we don't have a Christian on the platform today.
We invited them. Yes, it's unfortunate that today is Sunday.
If you let me explain, you would find that Islam, when you look at a religion, you have to look at, number one, the thing that is most important to determining what religion is right, is relevance. It has to be relevant. It has to answer the questions of our society.
Not to be specific and particular.
Yes.
So do all religions claim.
But all religions do not do that. Because, for example, if you look at the Christianity, which is also one of the big religions on the side of Islam, if you look at Christianity, you look at the Bible, and the Bible has no argument completely. It has complete absence of the argument of proposing that God exists. It doesn't have that argument. What it has are arguments, for example, in
the Bible acknowledges that God exists.
It does, but I'm just trying to put this point forward. Exodus chapter 20, verse 3, the first commandment you find, thou shalt not have any other deities besides me. You look at the Shema in Deuteronomy 6:4, and you look at Jesus echoing the same in Mark chapter 12, verse 29, and you find that the issue at the time was polytheism and not atheism. So since atheism was not a threat, Christianity did not address this. But Islam has addressed everything. So that's why we say that we put the Quran to the litmus test.
It's good that you are coming to a point I was coming to a little bit later. You specifically mentioned Islam, and you say you are an expert, of course, of comparative religion, a Muslim by faith. How do you convince people, Abdurrahman, that Islam, as many say, is a religion of peace, when in Somalia we have Al-Shabaab, in Nigeria, Boko Haram, ISIS in Middle East, terror groups who claim they are standing in for the authentic version of Islam?
It is very funny how many people have still not understood the concept of what is going on. And if we look at, for example, Kenya as a country, I believe that people are just being hypocritical. If we look at Kenya as a country, we see that if I ask you, for example, look at the country, are the people generally good or bad people in Kenya? We would all agree that Kenyans are good people. but we still have, you know, remand prisons. Why do we have prisons in Kenya if the people are good? It means that there are some people who tend to break laws and get out of the
But unfortunately, in Islam, it seems as though the bad ones are the ones who are headlining everything. They're the ones who say we are advocating for Islam.
Courtesy of the media and all that. But we find that in every society there is black sheep, and we are not. We are saying that Muslims are the ones who are suffering the most out of this.
Let me get Harrison to the conversation.
I'll just try and finish up with one sentence that you know, Muslims are the people who are suffering most out of these attacks, and we're trying to counter it as much as we can to counter the Al-Shabaab narrative and the Boko Haram who are bombing mosques, in fact. And when you look at Christianity as well, it's not safe from this because there is the Lord Resistance Army.
Okay, it's unfortunate that we don't have someone to argue. That's why I didn't make the point.